Hello everybody, Ranger John Heron here today, and I want to share with you some history on the Black Veteran Company of the Civilian Conservation Corps that helped build Huntsville State Park. To truly appreciate the accomplishments they made here, it helps to understand some of the struggles they went through, and to hear from their viewpoints. Segregated and underestimated, these African American veterans went on to build the foundation of this state park for a community that welcomed them. Now, a quick history on the CCC. It was created in 1933 as part of Roosevelt's New Deal. It provided jobs for a lot of young unemployed Americans who couldn't find work during the Great Depression. They also worked a lot on rebuilding our public lands. After the Dust Bowl and excessive lumbering, a lot of our lands needed help with erosion control, fire control, and they also worked on reforestation, which got them the title as Roosevelt's Tree Army. Now you have to think about where America was during the CCC. We were long after the Emancipation Proclamation, but we were still years short of the Civil Rights Act. So the CCC was formed during the Jim Crow law era. Now, the CCC originally did not want to segregate. However, southern states, Texas being a big one, pressured the CCC to segregate their companies. Now, they didn't just segregate by race, but by age as well. At that point, enrollees were 18 to 25 single males. Because of this young age, they were commonly referred to as the CCC boys. However, the government also wanted to make sure to take care of its veterans from World War I, so separate companies were formed of veterans, and they did not have to be single. Now, Company 1823 was truly unique to Texas. 29 state parks hosted CCC companies here in Texas, and there were about 31 companies that worked their way around through those parks. Now, here at Huntsville, we had 3 companies that came through. First off, we had 2 forestry companies, 873 and 1827. They came in with some fire and erosion control, planting trees, as well as setting up some of the early service roads. But it was 1823 that did a bulk of the work out here at this park. Now, each company was given a company number, but the segregated companies were given an additional label after their number. Of the 31 companies, 7 companies had the letter V after their company number. This meant that they were a company of veterans. 4 companies in Texas had the C designation, which means the men in that company were men of color. Only 1 company in Texas had the CV designation, meaning that they were men of color and veterans, and that was Company 1823. Originally formed in Abilene State Park, meant to be just a veteran company of mostly whites with some African Americans, they reformed the company to be a colored veteran company. They also worked in Palmetto State Park as well as here in Huntsville. So I recently uncovered a treasure trove of documentation from our company 1823. And reading through some of these correspondence, you realize one of the first struggles a black company had was where to set up their location. Because especially here in the South, if they wanted to set up a camp for them, they had to first get support from the community. So an investigation had to be opened with the city of Huntsville to see if the leadership would be okay with it. In September of 1937, the Executive Secretary Lawson of the Texas Parks Board sent a letter to the National Park Service saying that they had received a telegram from H.G. Webster, who was the Vice President for Huntsville National Bank and one of the primary contacts for the Texas Parks Board. In this, they approved having the African American Veteran Camp here at Huntsville. But the Executive Secretary wanted to make sure, so visited Huntsville in person, talked to the City Council, Chamber of Commerce, as well as some of the citizens at Huntsville, and found them to be agreeable and accepting of the African American company being set up here, and gave their wholehearted support. Now, while reading through all these correspondence, it's always nice to have a viewpoint from the other side. Now, none of these enrollees are around the park today, but what I do have is bits of their monthly newsletter that they put out. And so to get a viewpoint for how they felt coming to Huntsville. And when these African Americans were coming to Huntsville, there was some apprehension, partly because of the penitentiary that was here. But they spoke that the penitentiary was for bad men, and they were veterans of good, strong character. And part of that was reflected throughout their newsletters. They talked about morals and how they as veterans should aim for high moral standard, especially so they could be beacons and looked up to amongst the community. In their first editorial, they wrote that we who are learning to better live salute thee. They acknowledge the hardships and struggles they've come from, but also looking positively to the future and what they can learn and how they can grow here with the Civilian Conservation Corps. During Thanksgiving, they wrote about not just looking for big things to be thankful for, but for all the little opportunities they are given each and every day. They wrote about the dances that they went to, and even had poetry on the work they did, and even poetry of love. So one of the biggest jobs of Company 1823 at Huntsville was the building of Lake Raven. This is not a natural lake. This location was picked because there were 3 streams that fed into this area. So the 3 major tasks that had to be done was first off the building of the dam, then the spillway, and then they had to clear out a lot of the brush on the lake bed. So after 2 years, Company 1823 was nearing completion of Lake Raven. The next projects here at the park involved the Raven's Lodge, the boathouse, bathhouse, cabins, and camping facilities. It was then that a letter came out from the Texas Parks Board. They felt that these next projects would require some more skills like electrical and plumbing work, skills that they felt that a veteran black company didn't possess, and maybe a junior white company would be better suited for. There was some correspondence as to where our African American veteran company here would go to. One was to the city of Austin, to the Parks Department there. And a letter came out from the city council there that basically they did not want an African American company there. 1, they felt they would get more work out of white company. 2, though the city of Austin was fairly progressive at that time and had lots of black citizens, the particular park this company would go to is in an area that was unwelcoming to African Americans, and they worried about their safety. This letter was even labeled confidential because it said though the city did not want an African American company there, they didn't necessarily want the press to know about their feelings. It was then that a new executive secretary for the Texas Parks Board came and visited the city of Huntsville. They looked like they were so new, they didn't even have time to change his official letterhead. Just crossed out the former secretary and wrote his own name in place. And when he visited the city of Huntsville, realized that this city still welcomed the African American veterans of Company 1823 and wanted to see them complete the job here. So the black veterans of Company 1823 stuck around. They built Raven's Lodge, the boathouse, they did road work, some of their picnic benches are still standing today. Unfortunately, during their stay here, Huntsville received a lot of rain and their original spillway was washed away. I read correspondence where the Texas Parks Board was trying to find funding to get it rebuilt. Unfortunately, Company 1823 never got to see their spillway rebuilt. They also were never able to work on the cabins, because as America slowly started working its way out of the Great Depression, many of these enrollees were now finding good jobs, and a lot of key positions here in the camps were becoming vacant. At the end of 1941, I read a correspondence where they were questioning what was the future of the CCC, as well as for the future of this park. Several plans were being discussed as how the work could continue, even if the CCC were to get disbanded. And sure enough, in April 1942, a letter went out saying that the project here at Huntsville State Park and the Company 1823 colored veterans had been terminated. Beyond that, I don't know what happened to our enrollees. Records past the camp are very scarce. But with the U.S. going into World War II, many of Roosevelt's Tree Army found themselves enlisting into the U.S. Army. Beyond that, based on interviews from other CCC enrollees, many of them found careers using the skills they learned within the Civilian Conservation Corps. And I hope as you come out here, you get to have a little bit more appreciation for the work done here and respect for the men who fought to not be judged on what they look like on the outside, but judged for who they were on the inside. Y'all take care.